Hi. Um, it's May 30th. Just saw you yesterday. I'm on a roll. I'm back with if you watched the last video, you heard about the haircut drama. But I'm kind of into it today. Um, I took myself this morning to go buy a bunch of like little, I don't know, hair stuff like pomades and pastes and all the works, all the things, the gels, the whatever. Um, but yeah, when it's straight and kind of like this, it's a vibe. It's a vibe. I think it's probably the closest to like a rock and roll haircut I've ever had. Hence the black nails. I gotta just lean in. You know what I mean? Sometimes you gotta just lean in. So we're back in the forest. Hi. My pup is yawning. Shall we take a look at him? Ooh, just my sweetie. Okay, I'm back today to report that I've finished 4 minutes, and I'm going to talk to you about the books that I read this month. So this is my wrap up. There's a lot of books I've read since the last wrap up that I did, but honestly, like to think about wrapping all of those up feels like too daunting of a task for me because so much time has passed since a lot of them, and I just think if I keep trying to do that, I'll never post this. So I gotta just start back in the middle. Well, I really feel like I need to work in some lesbian bar and like pour you a drink, which is not bad at all. I'm not organized. Let me get the books together and I'll be right back. I should probably check what I read. Sometimes I read little obscure books or like poetry books and stuff that are not logged on Storygraph, so then I realize later that I'm forgetting things. But I hope that that's not the case for May. I finished 5 books in May. I'm gonna include a 6th book because I was reading it for most of May, and I just didn't finish it, and I'm not sure I'm going to eventually, but I think that I still wanna talk about it. Okay, first up, The Employees by Olga Raun, a booktube little favorite. Everyone loved The Employees whenever everyone was reading that. I'm one of the last people, at least kind of in my circle of friends on here, internet readers, that hasn't read this book. This is translated by Martin Aitken, and it's published, this version is New Directions, of course, because they always kill it with the covers. Paul Sade, I think is how you say his last name, or yeah, Sade, Sahre. He does amazing covers. So this book, for those that don't know, is about a spaceship called the 6000 ship landing every once in a while in this planet called New Discovery. So basically, this little novel is a collection of statements. So you'll see that it's broken like statement 78, statement 80. They're not exactly in order, they move around, and they're statements of the employees on the spaceship, some of which are human and some of which are humanoids, robot beings, the humanoids. Okay, I feel like I'm gonna have to edit these videos way more than I've edited the ones in the past, because when I speak about really trying to describe books, it's quite hard for me. So I just remembered that this is not gonna be so smooth. Anyway, there's these objects that have been collected and put onto the ship, and these statements are interviews with the employees about these objects, and about this spaceship in general, in the rooms, and also to get a gauge of the how the objects have affected the employees and if it has made a difference in how they manage to work and how productive they are, their performance, that's the word that I'm looking for, performance as employees. This is also called like a workplace novel. This book is so beautiful, so interesting, so inventive, and very, very moving. This was a buddy read with Katie James, and we really enjoyed. We didn't send like that many messages back and forth, but the few that we did, we're just kind of like gushing over this book to each other and being like, this book is so affecting, and it really, there's something about its like almost clinical nature that like is very emotional, and it kind of catches you by surprise. I really think it's a very singular book. I'm a huge Olga Raun fan. This book is signed by her because I saw her speak about her other novel, My Work, which I made a video about. And I'm like obsessed with her, really. She's so funny, she's amazing, and this book is just so, so good. It's super short, so like a perfect tiny. I like underline the shit out of this book, and there's one specific statement by an employee that I really have the dream of like adapting to something, either to a stage performance or a film or something. And I was chatting with Olga on Instagram about it, and I'm gonna send her an official email and see if maybe I can get like the rights for one specific part of this book, and try to do something with it. So anyway, it's like a big critique about life, what it means to be a human, what it means to be non-human, what is this relationship between human and object, and there's sort of like an eroticism as well to that. And someone in the audience of the talk that I saw with her mentioned this book and said that they felt like they were trans, and they were like, this book feels to me super trans. And she really loved that, and she said it wasn't the first time that she'd heard it, and she has a lot of trans friends that say something similar. So I loved kind of like having not read that book yet when I heard this discussion. It's yeah, beautiful, and like I won't spoil where it goes because yeah, like the dynamics start to shift and develop between the humans and the humanoids, and like yeah, it's just really, really beautiful. And it's like, what does it mean to be human? So that's as much as I'll say, but just great, purely wonderful. The next book I read, I don't have to show you, is The Hearing Test by Eliza Barry Callahan. I'll show you the cover. It looks like that with the dots and the clouds. Who is this published by? Catapult. This came out this year in 2024 in March, so it's fairly new. I mentioned in my last video yesterday that I really picked up this book because of Amina Kane, who blurbed it, and Amina Kane is an author I love if you're new here. And I'll like probably read anything that she ever like, you know, puts up on her Instagram and said, this is amazing, or I love this, or I'm reading this. Like, she's an instant add to my TBR kind of person. Like, if she mentions anything, I'll read it. And she really loved this. So this book follows a young musician, an artist who's living in New York, and one morning wakes up and has like sudden onset hearing loss. That develops over time to like different stages of intensity. And it's absolutely wonderful. Like, that and The Employees, probably like two of my favorite books that I've read this year. You have to read this book. I gave it to a friend. Our main character is just so compelling, and I think that this actually happened to Eliza Callahan, if I'm not, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it's autofiction. Um, because, yeah, I feel like she experienced this hearing loss in her own life. But it's really beautiful. It's really like a novel about seeing when you don't have sound. So, what what else do you have? You have a lot about seeing. And well, I just like, again, difficult for me to distill it because it's so, the prose is so wonderful. It's very clean, but amazing sentences. Like on a sentence level, it's great. Um, and it's still like I underlined a lot in that book. There's so much to take out of the exploration of what this book is doing, impact on our character of losing the hearing and going to like different therapies for it and traveling with it and like being in conversation or situations with various people and like this her ex, which they have like a really strange relationship with. He's kind of awful. um, and it's just like it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. It's also very short, so it I breezed through it. Very short chapters, which I always love. There's a section where she goes on Google Maps and like moves around Google Maps and like kind of journeys via Google Maps, like Google Earth, and that all of that stuff was super interesting as well. And yeah, it's just a really evocative, thinky, but digestible, clean, crispy, great book. I don't know. I feel like I'm not doing a very good job, as usual, of describing um, the books. Like the first paragraph, and you're like, ah, this book is for me. This book is for me. I'm gonna love everything about it. I'm gonna love our character. I'm gonna love the way it's written. I'm gonna love what like all the symbolism, all of the exploration of what it means to be living and being an artist and especially being a musician when you don't have hearing. And like I was just like obsessed with this book from the beginning to the end. Such a treat, such a good one. You really have to read this one. Okay, you're propped on the next two books, so I should okay, wait, I really need a second. I'm a mess. Okay, the next two books I just spoke about in my library haul video, but I didn't share my thoughts because I knew I was going to do this video. So the next thing I read was Love by Maya Nathan. This book follows a young sex worker living in like a nameless Israeli city. Mayan lives in Tel Aviv. She's a young Israeli. I like. She feels like a poet to me. I don't know if she calls herself that. Yeah, she writes short fiction and essays. This one's very short, 100 pages, super, super, also like not a lot of text on the page itself, so it's a very quick read. I read it in an afternoon, like in less than an afternoon, like in 2 hours, maybe. It's told mostly in first person, following Libby, who is the name of our main character. She's a young sex worker, and you kind of just follow her along her days and nights mostly, being driven by a driver to different clients, and it just like is a deep dive into her life basically, and her experiences, and also like her search for love and what that looks like and how that shows itself in her life, and at one point she manages to kind of get out of sex work and find love and find a more like traditional way, like society, based on society, traditional way of living. And does it, and is it actually better? That's the question that she kind of asks herself as she's navigating living, and finding different forms of love. I thought that this was very interesting, and I really appreciated the portrait of sex work being not romanticized. It's quite raw, which if I'm gonna read about that world, I want it to be, yeah, I want it to be raw. I want it to be what it is. On the other hand, I felt a little bit at times it was heavy handed, like a bit heavy handed. Like, so I wanted like some little balance between maybe a bit more subtlety, and then, but then also with it being, very raw. Like I said, this is the word that I can use because it feels like that. It feels like a raw wound sort of on the page. Um, so yeah, like it didn't hit for me completely, but I enjoyed it for like such a small little book. I feel like it's worth a read. Um, and yeah, I think it's her first, um, like it's her debut novel. So definitely would be interested to read whatever else she writes. Yeah, it wasn't like perfect, but I was very like incited. Like I couldn't get out until I finished it, which is definitely has merit. Okay, and then I read another tiny little book, So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan, Stories of Women and Men. These are three stories by Claire Keegan. She's an Irish author. A lot of people love Claire Keegan. This is my first Claire Keegan. And yeah, I saw this at the library, so I picked it up. They didn't have any of her other books. Maybe they're checked out, or maybe they don't have them. Um, so these three stories follow relationships of some kind between a man and a woman. The first one follows like a civil servant, who's like going over in his mind what his life would be like if he had been, with a different woman, um, and like how, if he had acted differently, what would his life look like? The second one is about this woman who's, at a writer's retreat, for like a writing residency, and gets like kind of disturbed by this man, who wants to see the house because the house that she's staying in is quite like famous and has historical, significance. And so she makes this like strange dinner for him, and he kind of like comes with all this criticism, um and like, yeah, mansplaining and stuff. And then the last one, called Antarctica, is about a married woman who really is very adamant on like having an affair. So she lies to her husband and goes to take a trip, basically to sleep with another man. And the man she meets at a bar, yeah, I won't tell you what happens, but it goes wild, and freaky, um, and unsettling. These stories have something quite unsettling, which I think plays like to the point of describing, taking three specific dynamics between men and women, and looking at the power play between the power dynamics, the dangers of men. I would say, especially in the last one. Yeah, very hetero. This is very hetero. It's not a queer book, but I did find it really good storytelling. And yeah, Claire Keegan is great. Like, she's a wonderful, wonderful writer. I really enjoyed these stories, especially the last one really stuck with me. maybe because the things that are more disturbing normally stick with us. But yeah, this was a treat. This was a treat. If you're just looking in an afternoon or like on a weekend to just read like three little short stories, I would highly recommend. I just finished this morning. 4 minutes, Natalia Deleva, translated from the Bulgarian. I feel like I'm on repeat because the last two videos I spoke about a lot of these books, so I feel like I'm just like selling you my script. Um, Translation by Isadora Angel. This is a novel from 2017, following our main character whose name, I'm not sure if we know her name. Leia? It might be Leia. Yeah, her name is Leia. It says it on the back. Um, she, as a child, was in an orphanage, and she's now the present day story is following her in her adult life, dealing with her past and her really rough and traumatic childhood in the orphanage, and her desire at some point now in her own adulthood to become a mother, struggles of her being a gay woman in Bulgaria trying to adopt a child as a single woman. She's just told it's like impossible. She doesn't qualify, but she is like haunted by needing to give specifically one girl at the home. It's called the home. Um, like giving her a different childhood than her own. Sorry, that sounds really convoluted, but it goes a lot between present Leia and past. So her past as a child in the home with all the other kids and all of the like hardships that they face there, um, and then she becomes a volunteer and like gets a job as well working with young orphans and a lot with like mental disability as well. And there's one child there that she really wants to take in and to adopt. So that's like one kind of storyline. Another storyline is following her and this other woman, Naya. They grew up in the orphanage together. They leave when they're 18, and they kind of have a romantic relationship with each other. And then she wakes up one morning, and Naya has also left. So it's a lot about like being left and not having a family, not having parents, not having a partner. It's like really about longing for all of those things, and especially the relationship with not having a mother, because I think her mother passes away when she gives birth to her. And like a lot of the parts of this book are her kind of like imagining different stories of who her mother was, or like kind of reinventing her childhood. So you have a lot of like passages which are like kind of, yeah, imagined memories if her childhood had been different. There's a lot of really beautiful parts of this book. I would say similar to Love. I felt it was a bit heavy handed, like in a way that personally I would like a little bit more left unsaid. Like, you know, when you describe a situation and like we understand that it symbolizes this, or we understand, like we read between the lines, and then you don't have to feed us like that symbol in words. Like I got it already. So sometimes when everything feels like it's said, then I feel like you there could be less said and it would be more powerful for me, if that makes sense. Yeah, and I wasn't sure maybe like what how this book functions in Bulgarian, but maybe the English translation is a bit to me um, on the nose sometimes. Um, and yeah, so also wasn't like a perfect book, but I think it's like a really beautiful um, an important like voice to hear from, and kind of subject to talk about. Oh, I forgot to mention that it also includes 9 other standalone character studies of like frequently, what does it say? Frequently ignored voices. And those are supposed to be read within 4 minutes based on this social experiment that if you stare at a person for 4 seconds, or sorry, 4 minutes while looking each other in the eyes, you will accept and empathize with them. Um, it was an experiment done with like a lot of Europeans in European countries and refugees who were living also in those countries, and like to pair those two groups of people up to create empathy or to test it. So this book functions also like an experiment in that sense. So yeah, I thought this book is doing a lot. Like it's quite conceptual. It like yeah, I think maybe it was doing a little bit too many things for me. It is like a very uncompromising look at life in Eastern Europe and in Bulgaria, and like yeah, yeah. So a lot of it is very strong and very powerful and hard to read, um, and in other parts I felt like it's very poetic, or like I tried to look up if Natalia Deleva is a poet, because the book feels to me very like a poet writing a novel, which I normally really love. But something about like how floral and poetic the text was sometimes, and how much imagery, and then how much like raw, uncompromising facts about life that she's diving into. Like sometimes those things couldn't blend for me. It's kind of like parts I like, parts are very interesting, parts are very important, and uncomfortable and beautiful sentences as well. But as a whole, I think didn't do it quite for me. And then the last thing I want to talk about is Sex and Rage by Eve Babbitt, which is the book that I have been reading most of this month but didn't finish. I'm on page 115 of 240. So I'm like halfway. Let's talk about it anyway. I'm not sure yet if I'm gonna go back to this or if I've kind of just fallen out of it and I can't seem to get back inside. Following a young woman that's growing up in California, in Los Angeles, and her name is Jacaranda, which I think is an amazing fucking name for anyone, but also like for a literary character. And Jacaranda's like a surfer, and she's like, it's Eve Babbitt, so like California girl, cool kind of carefree spirit. And she's a writer as well, and she's kind of going back and forth between Los Angeles and New York. And this is very like from the California perspective, that like she's like, New York is the death of me. Like, why would anyone go to New York? Why would anyone live in New York? Like when she gets asked to come to New York for like literary stuff, and she's like encouraged by her boyfriends or ex-boyfriends or friends to go, she like thinks that they want to ruin her life. Like she thinks that it's punishment to go to New York City, which I just think is such a funny there's like, this book is very funny. And yeah, it's like following her in like the rock and roll scene, which maybe had something to do with such a haircut that I have found myself having, like in the rock and roll scene, and different various jobs that she has, and like wild LA people that she meets and has crazy parties with. She's also an alcoholic. It's just wild. It's a wild, good time. There's sex and rage in it, and actually talking about it more makes me want to finish it, because yeah, it's quite like, I like Jacaranda as a character, and I think Eve Babbitt is great and super fun. And yeah, it's like the ultimate readable summer kind of literary romp, but still like written really well, very whip smart. and it's very like alive. Like you feel like you're reading an account of like a real life. Um, yeah, so anyway, I didn't manage to finish this because if I'm in the middle of the book, I should not go book shopping or book hauling from anywhere, from the library, from a shop, or anything like that, because I'll get more excited about the books that I find that I'll want to taste the new stuff, and then I'll like leave the book that I'm reading, and then it's hard for me to get back in, distracted by other books. And also like a woman on her own path and like trying to carve out who the fuck she is, who does she want to surround herself with, what does she want from life, what does she want from art, and like yeah, going her own way. So if that sounds like something you like, then you'd like this. So that is what I read in May. Um, After like having a pretty dead time with reading for a while, that was a pretty good month. The library like really reignited a love for reading. Like there's something about holding a, like normally I like a floppy paperback, but like something about actually holding a hardback book from the library with that like extra plastic like clear cover on it, like that makes that really specific crinkling sound that when you open it, you know, with the spine, like it is very exciting to me. I'm gonna go snuggle my dog and edit this and get it up. I'm working on some other additional platform for these videos because I mean, I could keep them all on YouTube, but I do want to think about if I'm going to do this so often, like what seems to be almost like daily for me now. Not that I'll be able to do that all the time, but I'd like maybe, I don't know if it's again on Patreon or maybe Substack, because that seems to, people like Substack more, I guess, these days, I feel. Like some kind of subscription basis. Because, you know, I'm trying to move back to New York at some point, and like I'm gonna have to pay a lot for rent. So any help would help. But anyway, I'm enjoying this very much, and love you. There you go. That you really get the full layered um, situation. My partner gets back from New York tonight. Looking forward to that. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Bye.